The silver bracelet caught the light as Kirsten Freed's trembling fingers reached toward it. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. In that upscale Charlottesville restaurant, surrounded by Virginia's elite, a $20 charm bracelet was about to unravel a mystery that had tormented one of the South's wealthiest women for 27 years.
Hello, if you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and tap the notification bell. Type in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as touching as this one, or maybe even crazier. And you don't want to miss it. Now let's begin.
The silver bracelet caught the light as Kirsten Freed's trembling fingers reached toward it. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. The young chef didn't hear her, too focused on the final swirl of sauce, the applause rising from the dining hall beyond the kitchen doors. In that quiet Charlottesville restaurant, surrounded by Virginia's elite, a $20 charm bracelet was about to unravel a mystery that had haunted one of the South's wealthiest women for 27 years. The Jefferson Oak Inn had never looked so alive. Crystal chandeliers glowed above rows of linen-covered tables, the hum of laughter floating beneath the faint strains of a jazz trio. Outside, the spring rain had left the cobblestone courtyard glistening under soft light. It was the annual Culinary Heritage Gala, the kind of event that drew old names, deep pockets, and carefully rehearsed smiles. And among them, sitting near the front beside a vase of tulips, was Kirsten Freed, 74, sharp-eyed, composed, and visibly weary of the world that still bowed to her name. The menu listed 7 courses, but Kirsten barely glanced at it. Food no longer impressed her. She had owned 5 restaurants across Virginia before retirement, each one a kingdom of flavor and control. Tonight, she was only here because Jeffrey Bradley, her longtime friend and former business partner, had insisted. "It'll do you good to be seen again," he'd said earlier that week. "People still respect the Freed legacy." She'd smiled thinly. Legacy, she thought, another word for what the living cling to when the dead can't answer back. When the first dish arrived, a citrus-infused tartlet with a rosemary glaze, Kirsten's fork paused halfway to her lips. The scent alone jolted her, lemon and sugar, the smell of summers long gone. Across the room, through the open kitchen window, she caught a glimpse of the chef, a young black woman moving with precision, directing her small team quietly but firmly. The line cooks followed her rhythm without hesitation. That must be Sarah Williams, the rising star from Richmond everyone was talking about. The paper had called her the future of Southern cuisine. But Kirsten wasn't watching her technique. She was watching her hands. And then, that flicker of silver. Sarah reached for a towel and the light caught on her wrist. A charm bracelet, simple, tarnished, but unmistakable. 5 small pendants hung from it, one in the shape of a tiny dove, another of a flower, and 2 letters etched into the roundest charm. J.P. Kirsten's world went still. The restaurant noise receded until all she heard was the blood rushing in her ears. 27 years ago, she had made an identical bracelet for her daughter Janetta Poirier on her 23rd birthday. Handcrafted by a local silversmith in Richmond, it was the only personal thing she had given her child before Janetta vanished. The night of the car crash still lives somewhere deep in Kirsten's bones, a blur of police lights, rain, and the sound of sirens echoing through the vineyards. They had said the baby didn't survive, that Janetta's body had been recovered, but the wreckage burned too badly to save anything else. Yet here, in this immaculate dining hall, that same bracelet shimmered like a ghost calling her name. Jeffrey noticed her pale face. "Kirsten, are you all right?" She blinked hard, forcing her composure back into place. Yes, I'm fine." But she wasn't. Every movement of the young chef behind the glass felt like an echo of the past. The tilt of her chin, the quiet focus, the same furrow in her brow Janetta had when she concentrated. When the dessert arrived, lemon-rosemary tart with vanilla sugar glaze, Kirsten's trembling hand nearly dropped the fork. Her daughter's signature recipe. It was impossible. The recipe had never left her home. She glanced at Jeffrey. "Who hired her?" He shrugged. "Some local foundation. She's been making waves all over the state." "Why?" Kirsten didn't answer. Her heart thudded louder than the room's applause as Sarah stepped out to greet the crowd, offering polite smiles as cameras flashed. For a moment, Sarah's eyes swept the tables and landed, briefly, on Kirsten. The old woman froze, breath caught between shock and recognition she couldn't explain. Something passed between them, not words, not gestures, but a current of quiet knowing that made Kirsten's hands tremble beneath the linen napkin. When the gala ended and the guests filed toward the foyer, Kirsten remained seated, watching the young chef pack away her utensils behind the glass. The bracelet glinted once more as Sarah wiped the counter and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Kirsten whispered to herself, "No, no, it can't be. She's gone." But deep inside, she knew some stories refuse to stay buried. If you were in Kirsten's place, would you chase the truth or leave the past alone? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what you would do.
The next morning, the storm clouds had cleared over Charlottesville, leaving the vineyards slick with dew and the air heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth. From the balcony of her old Georgian estate, Kirsten Fried watched the valley below stir back to life. Delivery trucks, cyclists, the faint whistle of a train winding through the distance. But all she could see was the bracelet. That silver glint from last night refused to leave her mind. She hadn't slept. The young chef's face, the confidence, the calm grace, it all pressed against her memory like a ghost she couldn't name. Downstairs, Jeffrey Bradley was already waiting with coffee and the morning paper. He looked far too comfortable in her kitchen, a man who'd been both business partner and Thorm for nearly 40 years. "You disappeared on me after the gala," he said. "You looked like you'd seen a ghost." Kirsten's voice was quiet, clipped. "Maybe I did." Jeffrey smirked faintly. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the paper, her eyes drifting across a headline on the local culture page. "Rising Virginia chef Sarah Williams takes culinary scene by storm." There she was, a photograph of the same young woman, smiling modestly, a faint dimple breaking through her otherwise serious expression. On her wrist, clear as day, the bracelet again. Kirsten's throat tightened. "She's talented," Jeffrey said, sipping his coffee. "Self-made. I heard she trained at a small program in Richmond. Now she's running her own place downtown. You'd like her. She's got that same fire Janetta had." Kirsten's hand froze mid-turn of the page. She looked up slowly. "Don't," she said. Jeffrey frowned. "Don't what?" "Don't say her name like that." He sighed. "Kirsten, it's been 27 years. You can't—" "I can and I will," she interrupted sharply. The air between them went cold. Jeffrey had learned long ago that Janetta's name was the one line Kirsten never allowed anyone to cross. Later that afternoon, Kirsten found herself standing outside the Hearthstone, the small restaurant tucked along Main Street. The sign above the door was simple, elegant, hand-painted. Through the window, she could see Sarah in her white chef coat, tying her apron, her movements precise and calm. Kirsten hesitated before entering. She didn't know what she was doing there. Curiosity, perhaps, or something older, something that had been waiting for this moment since the day she buried her daughter's empty coffin. When she stepped inside, the bell above the door gave a soft chime. "Good evening," said the young hostess. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Kirsten said, "but I was hoping for a quiet table." The hostess led her to a corner seat by the window. From there she could see into the open kitchen, see her. Sarah worked with the fluid precision of someone born into rhythm. She gave quiet instructions to her staff, never raising her voice, but the respect in the kitchen was absolute. Every eye followed her lead. Kirsten watched as Sarah plated a dish, thin slices of grilled peach over arugula, a drizzle of balsamic reduction, a crumble of feta. Simple, unpretentious. Janetta used to make something similar in their old summer home when peaches were in season. When the plate arrived at Kirsten's table, the scent of it hit her with the force of memory. She lifted a forkful to her mouth, and for a moment, she wasn't 74. She was 47 again, standing in Janetta's kitchen, laughing, the sound of rain outside, her daughter humming to herself as she cooked. Her chest ached. The waitress came over. "Would you like to try our special tonight, ma'am? It's a lemon-rosemary tart, Chef Sarah's signature dessert." Kirsten looked up sharply. "Did you say lemon-rosemary?" "Yes, ma'am. She said it's a family recipe." Kirsten's hand trembled. The same words. A family recipe. She hesitated for a long moment before nodding. "Yes, I'll have it." When the dessert arrived, she stared at it for a full minute before taking the first bite. The taste, sweet, delicate, unmistakable. Tears blurred her vision as the flavor opened like a memory long locked away. She saw Janetta's smile, the way she used to dust sugar across the tart and call it a kiss of forgiveness. The fork clattered softly against the plate. From the kitchen, Sarah looked up just in time to see the older woman's face, pale, trembling, and wet with quiet tears. Something in her chest tightened, though she couldn't explain why. There was something in that woman's expression. Grief, yes, but also recognition. Sarah's sous chef noticed. "You all right, boss?" Sarah blinked and looked away. "Yeah, she reminds me of someone." When Kirsten left the restaurant, the night air was thick with the smell of honeysuckle and rain. The lights of downtown Charlottesville shimmered faintly through the mist. She stood for a long moment on the sidewalk, clutching her purse to her chest, staring back through the window. Sarah laughed at something one of her staff said. The sound carried faintly, clear and familiar. Kirsten whispered, "You have her laugh." The words left her lips like a prayer. That night, Kirsten sat alone in her study, the tart half-eaten on her table, untouched coffee gone cold. She reached into the top drawer of her old desk and pulled out a small velvet box, its hinges tarnished, its color faded with time. Inside, the twin bracelet gleamed softly under the desk lamp, its silver polished, its charm still intact. She lifted it gently, her fingers trembling. On the center charm were the same letters etched in delicate script, J.P. "Janetta Poirier," Kirsten whispered. "You were here tonight, weren't you? If you tasted something that brought back the person you lost, would you follow that memory or let it fade quietly? Share what you do. I want to hear your heart."
The following morning, Kirsten Fried sat at her mahogany desk, the morning light slanting across old ledgers and dusted photographs. She hadn't left that desk in hours. The twin bracelet, her bracelet, rested beside the telephone, catching sunlight like a mirror of memory. On the wall above her hung Janetta's portrait, a sepia photograph taken the year she graduated culinary school. Her smile was shy but defiant, eyes bright with ambition. Kirsten traced the edge of the frame with trembling fingers. "Where did you go, my girl?" she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. Unable to silence the need gnawing at her, Kirsten picked up the phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years, Evelyn Clark, her old friend from the city clerk's office. "Evelyn," she said, forcing calm, "I need a favor, quietly." There was a pause. "After all this time, you only call when you want something?" Evelyn replied softly. "What is it?" "I need the report from my daughter's accident. The original, not the copy the police gave me back then." You mean the Poirier file? Evelyn hesitated. That case is sealed, Kirsten. It's been nearly 3 decades. Please. Something in her tone made Evelyn fall silent, then sigh. Give me a day. Kirsten hung up and sat still for a long time, the house groaning softly in the wind. Her eyes moved again to the bracelet, the twin silver charms, the same worn engravings. There were no coincidences that deep, she thought, not when grief still carried a pulse. That afternoon she drove downtown. The spring sunlight fell warm across the brick sidewalks of Charlottesville's historic district. She passed bakeries, antique shops, and a small community center with children laughing out front. The world moved normally, but she couldn't shake the weight pressing in her chest. Outside the hearthstone, she paused by the window again. Sarah was there, apron dusted with flour, laughter bright and easy as she rolled out dough on a wooden table. A warmth flickered through Kirsten's heart. Admiration, disbelief, longing. Then she turned away before Sarah could see her. She didn't want to intrude again. Not yet. Not until she knew the truth. That evening, Evelyn called back. I shouldn't have done it, but I pulled the file. Kirsten's voice trembled. And? Evelyn hesitated. There's something strange. The autopsy report says female adult, positive ID through dental records, but there's a note on the bottom of the page. Infant location, undetermined. Kirsten's breath caught. Undetermined? It means the baby was missing from the scene, Kirsten. They never confirmed its death. Kirsten closed her eyes, gripping the receiver. The sound of the rain outside blurred with the rush in her ears. All these years, the baby had never been confirmed dead. Meanwhile, across town, Sarah stood alone in her kitchen after the dinner rush. The restaurant was dark except for the amber light from the pass window. She had a letter spread out on the counter, one from the foster system. She had requested her records months ago, hoping to find out more about her birth parents. The envelope had arrived that morning, and she hadn't had the courage to open it until now. Her hands shook as she unfolded the papers. Place of discovery, Route 29 North, near Ivy Road, Charlottesville. Date, May 9th, 1998. Condition, found in swaddling cloth beside crash site. Identity, unconfirmed infant, approximately 6 to 8 months. Personal item, silver charm bracelet in left hand. Her heart stopped. The bracelet. Her fingers went instinctively to her wrist, touching the cool metal, tracing the same small charms she had worn all her life. At that same hour, Kirsten sat on her front porch, the sky bruising with twilight. She held Janetta's photograph in one hand, the bracelet in the other. Her thoughts churned like a storm. If that girl, no, that woman, is her daughter's child, then everything she believed about that night has been a lie. The headlines from 27 years ago flashed through her mind. Local heiress dies in tragic crash. Freed family withdraws from public eye. No survivors confirmed. She had built her retirement on those words, her acceptance, her quiet surrender. But what if the truth was still breathing? 2 days later, Evelyn sent the full report by courier. Along came a faded photo, a Polaroid from the crash site, the wreckage half buried in mud, and there in the corner of the frame, something small and glinting against the earth. Kirsten brought the photo closer. Her heart pounded. A bracelet. The same shape, the same chain, the same reflection of light. She pressed the photo against her chest and let the tears come freely this time. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. The file from social services lay open on the table. She read the line again. Found near crash site, infant location, undetermined. She'd always thought her birth story was simple, an orphan child found near a random accident, adopted by kind strangers. Now she wasn't sure who she was anymore. As the clock struck midnight, she whispered into the empty restaurant. "Who were you, Mama?" Across the city, Kirsten whispered the same question to the night. "Who are you, child?" Neither woman could hear the other, but somewhere fate had already started stitching the distance between them closed.
The rain had returned to Charlottesville that evening, tapping softly against the glass windows of the hearthstone. The kitchen lights glowed golden against the gray sky, casting Sarah's silhouette across the tiled walls. She worked quietly, cleaning up after the final dinner service. The others had already left. It was close to midnight, and the city outside had fallen still. She reached to untie her apron and froze. A reflection flickered across the glass of the kitchen window. Outside, through the thin curtain of rain, Kirsten Fried stood beneath a black umbrella, her figure faintly illuminated by the light from inside. For a long time, neither woman moved. Sarah's pulse quickened. She didn't know why, but something deep within her felt it, that same strange pull from the night of the gala. After a moment, Sarah walked to the door and unlatched it. The bell above gave a soft, hollow chime. Kirsten stepped in, closing her umbrella. Water dripped from her coat onto the floor. "Mrs. Fried," Sarah said, surprised. "We're closed." "I know," Kirsten replied. Her voice trembled slightly. "I won't keep you long." Sarah nodded cautiously. "All right. Can I get you something? Tea, maybe?" "No," Kirsten said. I need to ask you something." The air between them tightened. Rain whispered against the windows. Kirsten's eyes moved to Sarah's wrist. The silver bracelet caught the faint light, familiar, haunting. "Where did you get that?" Sarah looked down. "This?" "Yes," Kirsten whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "That bracelet." Sarah hesitated. "It's always been mine. I've had it since I was a baby. The orphanage said it was found with me." Kirsten felt her knees weaken. "The orphanage?" "Yes, in Richmond," Sarah said carefully. "I was adopted when I was 2. I never knew who my real parents were." Kirsten's breath hitched. "May I see it?" Sarah hesitated, then slipped it off and handed it over. The cool metal pressed into Kirsten's palm like an echo of time itself. She turned it slowly, her eyes tracing every curve, every scratch, until she saw them, the letters etched into the round charm. J.P. Her hand trembled. "Janetta Poirier," she murmured. "Sorry?" Kirsten looked up, tears filling her eyes. "Those initials, they belong to my daughter. She died 27 years ago in a car accident. She was pregnant when she stopped, her voice collapsing under the weight of memory. Sarah's brow furrowed. I don't understand. You were found as a baby near a crash site. That crash, it was hers." Sarah took a step back, her voice unsteady. "You think I'm my granddaughter." The room fell into silence so heavy it seemed to absorb the sound of the rain. Sarah shook her head, stunned. "No, that can't be. I'm sorry, but that's impossible." Kirsten reached into her purse and pulled out a folded photograph. She laid it on the counter between them. A young woman smiling in front of an old restaurant, her hands dusted with flour, a bracelet gleaming faintly on her wrist. Sarah stared at it. The woman's face was hauntingly familiar. The same eyes, the same dimple that appeared when she smiled. "I had this picture taken the week before she disappeared," Kirsten whispered. "That bracelet was the last thing I ever gave her." Sarah's throat tightened. She didn't want to believe it. Didn't dare. Kirsten stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "The bracelet, the recipe, the way you move, even your voice. You have her hands, Sarah. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. Stop. I'm not crazy, Kirsten said softly. I had your DNA tested. Sarah froze. You did what? I found a strand of your hair on the napkin that night. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have, but I had to know. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. And? Kirsten's eyes filled with tears. You're her child. You're mine. The room went silent again, except for the low hum of the refrigerators. Sarah stared at her, disbelieving, furious, terrified. Then, quietly, You had no right. Kirsten flinched. Sarah's voice rose. You don't get to walk into my life and tell me who I am after 27 years. You had a test done without asking me? Who does that? I just wanted to know the truth, Kirsten said. I didn't mean... You didn't mean what? To ruin the one piece of peace I had? Sarah's hands shook as she snatched the bracelet back. You think I needed this? You think I wanted this? Kirsten tried to speak, but no words came. Sarah took a breath, her chest heaving. Whatever happened between you and your daughter, that's not my burden. Please, just leave. Sarah, please. The word cracked like glass. Kirsten looked at her one last time, at the child she had unknowingly grieved all her life, and felt the world tilt. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I just wanted to see her once more. She turned and walked out into the rain, the sound of the door's closing bell echoing through the empty restaurant. Sarah stood frozen behind the counter, the photograph still lying where Kirsten had left it. The woman in the picture smiled back at her, warm, alive, impossibly familiar. Sarah lifted her trembling hand and touched the image, her own reflection staring back through her tears. Outside, Kirsten walked through the downpour, the bracelet's twin clenched in her palm. She didn't look back. And though neither woman spoke it aloud, both knew something irreversible had just begun.
The rain had passed by dawn, but the world it left behind felt hollow. Charlottesville was washed clean, yet Kirsten Freed's heart still carried the storm. She sat at the kitchen table of her old estate, the photograph of Jeanetta Poirier spread beside a cup of untouched coffee. The twin bracelet lay next to it, 2 charms missing, the chain faintly tarnished. Across from her, Jeffrey Bradley stood with his arms crossed, disbelief written across his face. "You went to her?" he said finally. Kirsten nodded once. "And?" "She's the one." Jeffrey scoffed, pacing. "Kirsten, you've convinced yourself of this because you want it to be true. You're clinging to ghosts." She slid an envelope across the table. "That's her DNA." He frowned, picking it up. Inside, the document's seal glinted faintly. Result, 99.7% probability of biological relationship. Jeffrey went still. Kirsten's voice was soft, but steady. "You see? It isn't madness. It's her. My granddaughter." Jeffrey sank into the chair opposite her, rubbing his face. "My God!" Kirsten looked at him sharply. "You knew something, didn't you?" He hesitated. Her tone hardened. "Back then, after the crash, you were the one who identified Jeanetta's body. You and Doug Rosenbaum. You told me the baby was gone." Jeffrey's jaw tightened. "Kirsten, it was complicated. Answer me." He exhaled. "Doug thought it was best that way." Her voice shook. "Best?" "He said there were liabilities. The crash involved his company car, his insurance, his reputation. The press would have torn us apart if they'd known a child survived." Kirsten's blood ran cold. "You hid her?" "I didn't hide anything," Jeffrey snapped. "Doug made a deal with the coroner to close the case quickly. I didn't question it." Kirsten rose slowly from her chair, her voice trembling with rage. "You let me bury an empty coffin." He couldn't meet her eyes. 27 years, Jeffrey,
she whispered. "I mourned her every morning, every night, and all that time my granddaughter was alive, out there, and you said nothing." Jeffrey stood, defensive now. "It wasn't my choice. It was your silence." That afternoon, Kirsten drove back toward the city, the road winding through vineyards still wet from the storm. Her hands shook on the steering wheel, grief and fury coiling together inside her like two threads that refused to separate. She parked outside the hearthstone, but didn't go in. Through the window, she saw Sarah laughing with her staff, her face animated, her hands moving gracefully as she spoke. There was life in her, fire. Everything Jeanetta had once been. Kirsten stayed in the car watching her, afraid to shatter what she saw with the truth she carried. Inside, Sarah was pretending to smile. All morning, her mind had replayed last night's confrontation, every word, every tremor in the old woman's voice. "You're her child. You're mine." It was absurd. It had to be. And yet, the bracelet, the initials, the location of her birth, the crash, every thread led back to the same place. She couldn't stop thinking about it. When the last of her staff left for the night, she sat at the counter with her phone, scrolling through local archives. Articles from 1998 appeared one after another. Heiress Jeanetta Poirier killed in car accident. Infant presumed dead. Her stomach nodded. Presumed, not confirmed. Her breath hitched. She opened the box of foster documents again, rereading the report. Found near crash site, infant location undetermined. There it was again, the same word, undetermined. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, eyes stinging. God, could it be true? The next morning, a small envelope arrived at her restaurant with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "If you want answers, meet me at the old vineyard off Route 29, 5 p.m. K.F." Sarah stared at it for a long time, her heart pounding. She almost threw it away, almost, but something inside her refused to let it go. At 5, she drove out to the vineyard, its once bustling tasting room now abandoned, the vines overgrown with ivy. Kirsten stood waiting near a wooden cross planted at the edge of the property, weathered, half buried in grass. The inscription was faint but visible. "Jeanetta Poirier, a mother's love never dies." Sarah stopped several feet away. "Why did you bring me here?" Kirsten turned. "Because this is where they told me your mother died." Sarah looked at the cross, then back at her. "And you think I'm her child?" "I know you are." Kirsten stepped forward and handed her the DNA report. "I didn't want to show you like this, but it's the truth. No one else could wear that bracelet. No one else could make that tart exactly the way she did." Sarah stared at the paper, the words blurred as her eyes filled. "You tested my DNA without asking," she said quietly. "I did," Kirsten whispered, "and I'd do it again if it meant finding you." Sarah's hands trembled. "You had 27 years to look for me." Kirsten's voice broke. "I didn't know you were alive." "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Kirsten's throat tightened. "If I could change it—" "But you can't," Sarah interrupted, tears spilling freely now. "You had money, power, connections, and you let someone tell you your daughter was gone without ever asking questions." Kirsten stood there, her silence the only answer she could offer. Sarah turned away, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know what you expect from me." "Nothing," Kirsten said softly, "except maybe a chance to make this right." Sarah looked back at her, pain, disbelief, and exhaustion in her eyes. "You can't fix the past, Mrs. Freed. You can only live with it." She turned and walked back toward her car. Kirsten stood alone by the cross, clutching Jeanetta's photograph against her chest. The vineyard wind brushed through the tall grass like a whisper. "I'm sorry," she murmured to the air.
For the first time in decades, Kirsten Freed's mansion felt unfamiliar. The house that had once symbolized success now breathed like a museum of ghosts, every hallway echoing with unspoken apologies.
2 days had passed since the confrontation at the vineyard. She had not left her home. The phone rang, unanswered. The report, the bracelet, the truth, all of it lay spread across her dining table like evidence in a trial she hadn't meant to start. Outside, the late spring sun poured through lace curtains, glinting against crystal glassware from a forgotten dinner service. Each sparkle reminded her of Janetta's laugh. Each silence reminded her of Sarah's voice saying, "You had 27 years to look for me." Kirsten sat there for hours, until the doorbell shattered the quiet. Jeffrey Bradley stepped inside without waiting to be invited. His tie was crooked, his expression grave. "You've caused quite a stir. The DNA leak hit the local press this morning. Someone tipped them off." Kirsten didn't look up. Let them write whatever they want. Jeffrey's voice sharpened. "Do you understand what this means? They're calling it the Freed family scandal. They're digging into the old records, Rosenbaum's company, the crash, all of it." "Good," she said simply. He stared at her. "Good? You'll destroy everything you built." Kirsten finally looked at him. Her eyes were clear, hard, certain. "It was never built on truth anyway." Jeffrey sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "Doug's widow called me this morning. She's furious. She says you're trying to rewrite history." "I'm trying to set it right," Kirsten replied. "You knew. You both knew." Jeffrey's shoulders slumped. "Doug made the call. He bribed the coroner. I just went along." She stared at him, voice low. "You let me mourn an empty grave." He looked down, shame clouding his face. "It was a mistake. We thought silence would protect you, protect the brand. You had restaurants to open, investors to answer to. Doug said it would break you if you knew the truth." Kirsten's tone was icy calm. "He was right about one thing. It did break me. Just later." That night, she sat by the fire, Janetta's photograph in her lap. Outside, thunder rolled softly over the Blue Ridge Hills. For years, she had believed her empire was her daughter's legacy. Now she saw it for what it was, a monument built over a lie. She rose, walked to her office, and began writing, a letter to the Charlottesville Post. Every detail, every name, every deception. When she was done, she sealed it and placed it on the edge of her desk. Tomorrow, the world would know what the Freed Empire had been built on. Across town, Sarah Williams sat in her darkened apartment above the restaurant. The note from Kirsten still lay on the counter, but now it was joined by the DNA report, the newspaper clipping, and the photograph from the vineyard. She had thought distance would bring peace. It hadn't. Every time she looked at the bracelet, her heart twisted between anger and a longing she couldn't define. The restaurant's phone buzzed with messages, reporters asking for interviews, local stations wanting her comment. She ignored them all. She didn't want fame. She wanted answers. Late that night, she drove out to Route 29 again. The road was empty, the moon hidden behind clouds. She parked by the rusted guardrail and stepped into the wet grass. There, at the edge of the vineyard, the small wooden cross still leaned against the earth. She knelt beside it, fingers brushing the worn inscription, "Janetta Poirier, a mother's love never dies." Her breath caught. "You didn't lose me. They took me." For a moment, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rosemary from the nearby fields, as if memory itself still lingered there. She closed her eyes, tears falling quietly. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the ache, a decision began to root deep. The next morning, headlines flooded the state. Charlottesville restaurateur Kirsten Freed exposes 27-year cover-up. Corruption behind heiress crash confirmed. Infant was never declared dead. Television crews gathered outside her gate.
Reporters called her a fallen icon, a truth teller, a scandal in pearls. Kirsten didn't hide. She stepped onto her porch, steady despite the flash of cameras. "I'm not here to defend myself," she told them. "I'm here to honor the daughter I failed and the granddaughter I almost lost twice." Her voice broke, but she didn't turn away. Inside the restaurant, Sarah watched the broadcast from the small office, heart pounding. Her eyes softened when Kirsten said the words, "This isn't shame, it's redemption." For the first time, Sarah saw something in the woman's face she hadn't seen before, truth stripped of pride. That evening, a letter arrived at the hearthstone. Inside, a single line in neat cursive. The freed name no longer belongs to a lie. KF. Sarah folded it carefully, setting it beside the photograph she now kept framed in her office, the one of Janetta Smilin. Maybe, she thought, peace didn't come from silence. Maybe it began with someone brave enough to break it. If the truth could destroy everything you built, but free your soul, would you still speak it? Tell me below. Honesty always costs something, but sometimes it's the only way home.
The sky over Charlottesville was a pale, smoky gray when Kirsten Freed walked into the glass building that once bore her name, the Freed Culinary Group headquarters. The receptionist went silent when she saw her. No one expected the woman who had become the center of statewide scandal to walk in like this, calm, composed, and holding nothing but a single envelope. She didn't stop at the front desk. She went straight to the corner office where Jeffrey Bradley now sat, a man she'd known for 40 years, a man who had once toasted her victories, who now hid behind lawyers and polished statements. Jeffrey looked up, startled. "Kirsten, you shouldn't be here." She closed the door behind her quietly. "I'm not here to argue. I just want to finish what I started." He frowned. "The damage is already done. You've burned your reputation to ashes." She placed the envelope on his desk. "No, you did." He leaned back, trying to recover his composure. "What do you want from me?" "The truth," she said simply. Jeffrey laughed bitterly. "After all this time, what difference would it make?" Kirsten's voice dropped, quiet but cutting. "It will make the difference between peace and rot, Jeffrey. For me, for her, and for that girl you tried to erase." He exhaled slowly. "Fine. You want the truth? Doug and I both knew. The night of the crash, the police report came in. A car belonging to Rosenbaum Enterprises. The passenger was dead, but the baby wasn't there. Doug panicked. He called the coroner, paid him to close it up. I signed off. You were too fragile then. Janetta's death would have ruined you. So we did what we thought was best." "Best?" Kirsten repeated. "You buried my daughter's life under a contract." He said nothing. She took a step closer, her eyes sharp with grief and fury. "Do you have any idea what it's like to look at a photograph every morning and wonder if you killed your own child with silence?" Jeffrey looked down, voice small. "I was trying to protect what we built." "You mean the money," she said. He didn't deny it. Kirsten opened the envelope and slid a document across his desk. "This is the deed to the Freed Group. Every share, every property. It's yours now." Jeffrey's head snapped up. "What are you doing?" "Ending it," she said. "Every restaurant that bears my name was built on a lie. I'm giving them away, to Sarah, to her foundation." "You're insane," he hissed. "You'll walk away with nothing." "I already have nothing. I lost it the night you lied to me." Meanwhile, Sarah Williams sat in her car outside the building, her fingers gripping the steering wheel. She'd seen the broadcast that morning, rumors that Kirsten was stepping down. She didn't know why she'd come here. Closure, maybe, or something more fragile. Understanding. Through the glass doors, she saw Kirsten emerge, walking slowly, but with an unshakable calm. Their eyes met across the courtyard. Sarah stepped out into the cold wind, the distance between them, charged and silent. Kirsten stopped in front of her, face pale but resolute. "I told him everything," she said quietly. "Every lie, every name.
The world knows now. Sarah's voice trembled. Why would you do that? Because truth deserves witnesses, and because you deserve to be free of the chains I helped forge. Sarah looked down. You didn't have to ruin yourself for me. Kirsten smiled faintly, tears gathering in her eyes. I didn't do it for me. I did it for her, and for you. Sarah swallowed hard. You still think I'm her daughter? Kirsten reached into her coat pocket and handed her a small velvet box, the same one that once held the twin bracelet. Sarah opened it slowly. Inside lay Janetta's original charm bracelet, polished, shining softly in the gray light. I kept it all these years, Kirsten whispered. I thought it was all I had left of her, but now I see it was waiting for you. Sarah's eyes filled. Why are you giving it to me? Because it's not mine anymore, and because it's time someone in this family starts wearing the truth without shame. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the bracelet. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind picked up, scattering petals from the cherry trees that lined the courtyard. Cars passed, people glanced, but for that moment, time seemed to stand still. Kirsten reached out, brushing a tear from Sarah's cheek. You don't have to forgive me, she said softly. Just don't let my silence become yours. Sarah looked at her, the woman who had caused her so much confusion and pain, and, despite herself, nodded. I won't, she said quietly. Kirsten smiled through her tears. Then maybe that's enough. She turned to leave, her coat catching in the wind. Sarah watched her go, the bracelet cold in her palm, her heart torn between fury and compassion. The truth had cost them both everything, but somehow it felt like the only thing that could save them.
A month passed. Charlottesville had settled into the soft rhythm of early summer. Green hills, slow breezes, the hum of life returning after the storm. The scandal that once filled headlines was fading. People had moved on to new stories. But for Kirsten Freed, the silence that followed wasn't punishment. It was grace. She had sold her properties, closed her office, and donated every remaining share of her company. What was left of her fortune had gone into a quiet foundation in her daughter's name, the Janetta Table Fund, designed to help foster youth and single mothers learn the culinary arts. She had traded power for peace, and for the first time in her life, she could breathe. That evening, the front door of the hearthstone opened, and every sound seemed to pause. Sarah Williams looked up from wiping the counter, startled. Kirsten stood in the doorway, dressed simply in a pale blue sweater and long skirt. No pearls, no diamonds, no armor. Just a small brown box in her hands. Sarah hesitated, then nodded toward a stool by the counter. You can sit if you want. Kirsten smiled faintly and took the seat. I was hoping you'd say that. The air between them was quiet, but no longer tense, just heavy with things unsaid. Kirsten placed the box on the counter and pushed it forward. I brought you something. Sarah opened it carefully. Inside lay an old family cookbook, its pages yellowed and stained with time. On the inside cover, a faint inscription read, To Janetta, so you'll never forget that love, like flavor, grows when shared. Sarah's throat tightened. This was hers? Kirsten nodded. She wrote notes in the margins. Some of them are ridiculous. She once tried to put cinnamon in cornbread. A small, almost shy smile crossed her lips. Sarah traced the handwriting with her fingertips. I think I've made this one, she whispered. The lemon-rosemary tart. Kirsten chuckled softly. Of course you have. They stood side by side in the kitchen, awkward at first, like two people learning a language they both once knew. Would you, Kirsten hesitated, would you show me how you make it now? Sarah looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Sure, but I'm not letting you near the whisk. A hint of laughter, a sound that felt like sunlight through glass. They worked quietly, the rhythm of baking filling the space, the crack of eggs, the whisk of sugar against the bowl, the fragrance of lemon and herbs blending in the warm air.
At one point, Kirsten reached to steady the bowl. Their hands brushed, and both froze, just for a second, before continuing. There was no need for apology. The silence itself was healing. When the tart went into the oven, the kitchen filled with the scent of rosemary and butter, rich, nostalgic, alive. Kirsten leaned against the counter watching Sarah move. "You have her hands," she said softly. Sarah looked up, eyes glistening. "Then maybe she taught me how to feed you again." Kirsten's lips trembled. "Maybe she did." They didn't speak for a while after that. The timer dinged softly. Sarah pulled the tart from the oven, golden and delicate. She placed it on the counter, slicing it gently. 2 plates, 2 forks. They sat together tasting the dessert in silence. For the first time in 27 years, it didn't taste like grief. It tasted like home. As they finished, Sarah whispered, "You know, I used to think recipes were just instructions." Kirsten smiled faintly. "And now?" "Now I think they're letters from the people we've lost." Kirsten's eyes filled, but this time the tears didn't burn. "Then I'm glad mine finally reached you," she said.
1 year later, the hills of Charlottesville were alive again with laughter, music, and the faint aroma of lemon and rosemary. At the edge of town stood a newly restored brick building, its sign hand-painted in elegant cursive, the Janetta Table Foundation. The front doors were open and sunlight poured across a long wooden table set for 20. Every seat was filled. Local chefs, single mothers, foster youth, and culinary students from all over Virginia. In the middle of it all, Sarah Williams moved easily through the room, apron dusted with flour, her smile steady and bright. She was no longer just a rising chef. She was a teacher, a mentor, and for the first time in her life, part of a family she understood. On the far end of the table sat Kirsten Fried, dressed simply in soft cream, her silver hair pinned neatly behind her ears. She looked older, gentler, lighter, as if years had quietly lifted from her shoulders. When Sarah caught her eye, Kirsten smiled. They didn't need words anymore. Everything that mattered was already said. A journalist from the Charlottesville Post stood near the doorway, taking notes. "Miss Williams," he called, "can we ask what inspired this foundation?" Sarah paused, glancing toward Kirsten. "A story," she said softly, "a long one, about loss, forgiveness, and the power of one meal." She looked around the room at the laughter, the clatter of dishes, the smell of bread baking. This place isn't about fame or money. It's about feeding people who never thought they'd be seen. The reporter nodded. "And the name, the Janetta Table?" Sarah's eyes softened. "It's named after the woman who taught me, without ever meeting me, that love can survive even the cruelest silence." Kirsten's eyes brimmed with tears, pride shining behind them. Later that evening, when the guests had gone and the lights dimmed, Sarah walked to the wall by the entrance. There hung a framed photograph, Janetta Poirier smiling in a kitchen, flour on her hands, a charm bracelet glinting faintly on her wrist. Beside it, a newer photograph, Sarah and Kirsten side by side, both holding whisks, both smiling with the same quiet warmth. Sarah reached up and adjusted the first photo slightly. "Now you're home," she whispered. Kirsten stepped beside her. "You've built something beautiful here." Sarah smiled. "So did you. I just finished it." Kirsten reached into her pocket and drew out a small velvet pouch. She pressed it gently into Sarah's palm. Inside was the second bracelet, the one Kirsten had kept her whole life. Its silver chain was polished, its charms restored. But one charm had been added, a tiny heart engraved with new words. "Home is where we're found." Sarah's eyes shimmered. "It's perfect." Kirsten nodded, tears in her voice. So are you. As the last light faded beyond the windows, the two women stood together at the long table, the past behind them, the future finally theirs. In the quiet glow of evening, Kirsten whispered, "Some recipes are written in ink, others in blood, but the best ones are passed down through love." Sarah smiled through her tears, and love never runs out of ingredients. They laughed softly, their voices echoing against the warm brick walls. For the first time in 27 years, the Fried family story didn't end in silence. It ended with a meal, a name, and two hearts finally at peace. If you could heal one broken story in your life, one relationship, one silence, one wound, what would it be? Tell me in the comments below, because some stories, just like love, only come full circle when they're finally shared.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you loved this story, you will definitely love the next one. It's more intriguing than you can ever imagine. So go ahead and watch it now. Click on the image on your screen right away to watch the next one. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. It helps and encourages us to share the best human interest stories you'd love.